Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Cultured Nerd Podcast. This week, Michael and I are going to talk about quite a few things, but first and foremost, we're going to talk about Madam Web. This movie is now on the top 3 of Netflix for who knows how, for who knows why. This movie is blowing up all over Netflix because apparently everyone who didn't see it in theaters are finally watching it on their Netflix account, and everyone kind of has the same idea of this movie. So I sat down, I watched it. I have plenty of thoughts. So many things to talk about that I want to say, but aside from that, we're also going to talk about the X-Men '97 finale. We're going to talk about George Lucas kind of dropping some bombs at Cannes over the weekend, and above all, we're going to talk about Furiosa, a movie that came out that was absolutely fantastic, but apparently nobody is seeing it, so it's absolutely insane. So we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about all these fun things, and here we go. So, how was your weekend?
I was expecting to go to the office Tuesday morning and around the water cooler have everyone in the office tell me what they thought of Furiosa. Nobody saw it.
Yeah. Insane.
What people are doing is staying at home watching Madam Web because it is a train wreck. I have issues with it as a movie. I also have issues with it with the Spider-Man. As a Spider-Man movie, they in the movie showed you the movie that we wanted that we did not get. They showed us 15 minutes of the movie that probably would have been pretty good, but we didn't even get that movie.
Right. So I have thoughts. So for starters, I guess we're just going to jump right into it because Madam Web has been blowing up.
Was this a cursed movie, Taylor? Did I not know that this movie was cursed before it came out?
Yes, it was a cursed movie because of a myriad of reshoots, a myriad of retoolings. They had so many things that they wanted to do with this film that it definitely got cut at the legs multiple times during production. And from a lot of the stuff that I heard was that initially they were gonna try to treat it like a almost a Terminator movie where Ezekiel was trying to kill Emma Roberts' Mary Parker to stop Spider-Man from being born, which would have made more sense than what we got.
In the YMS review, they talked about how the the 3 girls were so very unnecessary for the story and that we could have focused on one of them. I kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
Have one of the persons also be experiencing their powers. Like, not just Madam Web, because that angle of it, you can feel those scenes. Why does Sony hate Bruce Wayne? Because it felt like Ezekiel was just a bad Batman.
All right. And on that note, I want to talk about one of my biggest gripes of the whole movie. It was quite literally Ezekiel Sims. Ezekiel Sims as a character is not at all what we got. Because Ezekiel Sims in the comics wasn't a villain. He was first introduced in a comic that was actually one of the first trades I picked up. It was the Amazing Spider-Man 33 back in 2001, right? Back when we were in high school. When we started getting into comics again, I started picking up these Spider-Man comics. And during this run, Spider-Man has been Spider-Man for a while. In the comic, he's a professor now. He's a college professor, and he's trying to like deal with his life with Mary Jane and kind of dealing with like post high school, post everything. And then one friggin' day, he meets another wall crawler, and he's like, "What the hell?" And this guy's like, "Oh, shouldn't be weirded out by me. I exist." And he basically describes what we essentially got in this movie: that there was this Amazonian tribe. He went searching for powers, and as he said it in the book, the origins of my powers aren't as pleasant as yours. And then it kind of cuts to him basically saying that there is another villain who is even worse. And the villain is by the name of Morlun, right? This guy, essentially the same same thing. He is a spider totem character, and his whole deal is that he is trying to do like Jet Li the One style and hunting down everyone with spider powers and absorbing their essence.
Okay.
And what we got in the movie was Ezekiel Sims, who was the billionaire Ezekiel Sims, mixed with Moreland, the I'm going to hunt down the spider people.
They did such a poor job of explaining all of that. Like like his money, all of it. Also, were all of his lines ADR'd? His audio never matched his mouth.
Never did. And that's why I felt like a lot of that was let's fix this in post. And they redid the whole movie in post. Because like I said, they were supposedly there was one version of the story where he was trying to stop Spider-Man from being born. But there's also multiple versions of this film where one version of this film was that this was tied to the Andrew Garfield movies, and another version of this film that it was tied to the Tom Holland movies. And then eventually they said, screw it, it's going to be in 2003 and it's not going to make any sense.
They should have done this movie like Memento. It should have been like 5-minute chunks where she keeps waking up and some other thing happens, and then we see the next fight. Like the movie feels so directionless, and the fact that they couldn't just anchor it on any one of those worlds, because after Spider-Man No Way Home, I think if it was Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield, I think there would have been enough excitement for make people want to go to invite this into that world, and it didn't.
Yeah, and it's such a weird thing because
Taylor, as a person that lived in 2003, those computers insulted me. That is not what computers look like in 2003. They were bad, basic bitch Microsoft computers. They were not 3D holographic, picture perfect faces.
Yeah, I was watching that. I'm like, okay, it seems like the director may not have lived during this time, but they watched Swordfish and they thought maybe that's how everything was. Because I was like, okay, when we were in high school, I had my Windows NT computer because it was like back then it was like Windows 95, 98, NT or ME, and we used NT because my dad was a programmer.
Yeah, and your computer was like a hot rod. You'd get like new parts to it.
Every year would get a little bit better. You had your translucent Mac that your dad gave you. And either way, it looked nothing like we got in that movie. And I don't know. It was like, even in 2003, I'm thinking about like, if they're trying to say like, oh, this was the era of social media. I'm like, no, it wasn't. Social media didn't start till like 2004, 2005. So even the era that they tried to like position this as, they were still wrong across the board. So all their marketing, all their tie-ins, all their weird stuff didn't make any sense.
The Britney Spears song makes no sense for that scene. Like the fact that he has toxic powers that he doesn't use enough. Every shot should be him poisoning her. I wanted to see Dakota Johnson die a million times and then like revive again.
I know. And that whole sequence where she's doing like this vision scene where she's speaking to him, but doesn't actually have to speak with him because she saw the thing. I was expecting him to be like, I'm just going to poison you every time we see you and just a little bit more. And I'm like,
yeah,
they just never did it. So I was like, it's a better
okay. What else did they bastardize in this story? Because I felt like they didn't want to like do Birds of Prey with all of the Spider Women. So they gave us something worse where they have no agency. Because I kept watching this like, DC tried to do this and they ran into a ton of problems. I think that movie's fine. I think that movie now, in comparison to this, is a much better movie.
I honestly didn't hate the movie when it came out, and I felt like I was a little bit of a minority in that one where I was like, oh, this was kind of a fun movie, but it wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst.
No, I agree with you. I thought it was a fun adventure with all of those characters in a Batman universe that we're not getting more Batman movies.
Yes. But on the same note for this film, it really felt like, to me, I was okay with the first 2 acts of this film. I was like, all right, I can get behind this. They did not stick the landing. And like, as soon as she went back to the Amazon, I just I'm like, okay, this just seems like they're trying to shoehorn this all in, and Taylor, it doesn't make any sense.
In the middle of a crisis, okay, we have to solve this. I'm going to leave for 1 week. You all stay here.
You all stay with Uncle Ben for a couple weeks. I'm going to fly down to the Amazon, and this guy's not going to find you. So for 2 weeks, just shack up with this random dude.
She should have gone to Hell's Kitchen, where she meets this drug dealer who gives her this Spidum venom ayahuasca. And he's like, yo, this is the real deal stuff. And she's like, I have to do it. I have to see what's there. She goes into ayahuasca spider territory. She sees machine elves. And then that guy comes out of the water and goes, oh, you found me again. Like, the fact that she had to go back there in a movie where you're a psychic person and you're traveling through spider webs is ridiculous. Ridiculous. A waste of time.
I did appreciate the creation of her powers, like her mom dying and getting bit by the spider and the spider failing to bring her to life. But it was very much a Blade kind of a sequence where she got part of the powers. And I was
Taylor,
like, okay, I can get behind this.
I think the parts of the movie we like are the parts of the movie that are most like the Phantom from the 90s.
Right.
Jungle, magic powers, spandex. Like, that Ezekiel could fight the Phantom in the jungle. I'd watch that movie.
But like I said, Ezekiel wasn't a bad guy. And I was so frustrated watching this film. I mean, maybe he became a bad guy in the comics later on, but his first actual interaction with Peter was like, very much a mentor figure. Like, I want to show
you. Do you think that they were trying to copy what they did with Spider-Man, with Miguel and the Enter the Spider-Verse? That he's the bad guy, but he's not really the bad guy. And that eventually there's a version of the script where we find out he's trying to stop something bigger than all of this.
Maybe they were trying to do something else there, but like the decision to mix Ezekiel and Morlun into one character, but then make him like this weirdly haunted character where like he only is trying to murder the girls because he had a dream every night that the girls are murdering him. And I was like, why are the girls murdering you? There's so many holes in this story. I'm like, why would these heroes gun him down? What's going on?
They're not heroes, Taylor. I don't understand what heroic things they did in this movie. They did not do anything heroic.
I was like, all the stuff. I mean, I loved seeing them in the costumes. I was like, this is awesome. Where's the rest of this? Give me that movie. What's going on?
It's a weird comparison that her name is Madam Web and she has a harem of 25-year-olds that are all children. I almost wonder if the girls needed to not be 17, but like 11. If they were going to grow up into those and then have Sydney Sweeney do an action scene, but we see them as their Girl Scouts and because it was like, all of you girls have agency. Like, why are any of you here? Why are you accepting this? Like, all of that was ridiculous.
There were so many holes in the setup to how this all existed that I'm just like, I don't know what you guys are doing, but it's not working.
Also, Taylor, I completely forgot that Madam Web doesn't have eyes and is in that weird chair all the time. Yeah. That like reveal of the character, I was like, all of this movie is garbage. This movie should have been a Daredevil movie. She should have been blind her whole life, and then all of a sudden she gets to see with psychic powers. Or I don't know, man.
Like I was watching it and I could see like parts of a decent movie, but clearly something happened in post, something happened in reshoots, and like I just felt bad for all of these people that are like immensely talented. Like Adam Scott is like one of the like biggest nerds, and he did great every scene he was in. I loved him. Emma Roberts did a fantastic Mary Parker, and all the teasing toward like, oh, I've got a baby coming, Richard's out of way, like we're not going to name him this, and like. But I also got kind of annoyed. Like I'm watching at the end of the movie where she's like laying there in the hospital bed and they're like, oh, Ben's going to have his handful being an uncle. And she's like, yeah, he is. And I'm like, are you smirking the fact that his sister-in-law and brother are going to die and he's going to have responsibility? Like, what the fuck's wrong with you, Madam Web? Like, what is your deal? Like, I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, I had so many issues with how they characterized some of the reshoot stuff that just made no sense.
Well, I think that's what it is, because I'm going to let you know that there are scenes that feel lackluster and no energy, like they are walking through the movie. And when we talk about Furiosa, not once did I feel any of those performances were phoned in. From Chris Hemsworth down to the woman in the maggot hole, everyone is giving a full performance, right? They're in the moment in that scene. Nobody is in the moment in any of those scenes in that movie.
And I think that was one of the things I noticed, was that in the scenes leading up to all the scenes, right, where you could tell that these were some of the original cut stuff, like with her having her car falling off the bridge and having that really cool sequence where she's under the water and all the webs. I'm like, okay, this was clearly a very early shot that they kept in and retooled. And then when she was having her weird like time skipping things where she's like, you already talked about this, what are you talking about? Or the whole the guy dying and her seeing him die and all that stuff, all that, I'm like, this was clearly what they wanted to do, and this was some of the original stuff that made its way through. I could see that this being like, this is the first cut stuff. Now everything else you guys are going to shoot in later on that doesn't make any sense, you can tell the quality, and I'm like, this doesn't fit.
Yeah, it has all of that like all of that apartment stuff. Her apartment looked like out of a Gap ad, not a Gap ad, like an IKEA ad. Like everything was brand new and built, and the bird kills itself.
It reminded me of that scene in Fight Club in the very beginning of the movie where he says, I bought all of this shit, designer, and I don't want any of it, but I had to have the new thing. And I'm like, that's what her apartment looks like. Someone just went through that scene, bought all the new things, and said, this is her apartment.
It just missed the mark. It missed it on so many things. And it makes me also nervous of what Sony is going to do with Spider-Man, because there's all of these great Spider-Man movies, but it makes me feel like maybe that's the other half pulling a little bit more weight. Like Sony doesn't have anything to do with the Spider-Verse movies other than they release them.
Well, they made the Spider-Verse movies. Those are their movies.
Right. But why is that story executing so much better than Madam Web?
Because they've got the right production people on there. By having Phil Lord and Chris Miller creatively controlling this stuff, it's like you can tell there is a disparity in who's running the show. Like, if you guys got these guys doing a great job, give them the keys of the kingdom to do this stuff too, because what you're doing is trying to shoehorn in all these characters, and whoever you're hiring, it reminds me, this is 2024, right? And this movie came out in 2024, but it feels like it was one of those early 90s superhero films where they clearly kept the characters' names and name only, and then just like went through a few comic books and said, oh, this would be a cool villain. Let's find another villain to mix him with. You know, like the same crap that I see in the MCU that I don't like when they took Whiplash and mixed him with Crimson Dynamo. That's what we got here with Moreland or Ezekiel Sims. But like, you had stuff where they just kept mixing characters together that had nothing to do with anything. And I'm watching this and I'm like, so you're telling me that Spider-Woman, Anya, all these characters who are like younger than Peter and supposed to be like his mentees, with the sole exception of Julia Cornwell, the Spider-Woman, she's like, I don't know, she's supposed to be older than Peter, right? The Sydney Sweeney's character. But the other two characters are supposed to be the younger Peter. Like, Peter's supposed to mentor them, and yet all of these characters are 17 years older than him now?
Yeah, they're going to be in their they're all going to be in their 30s when they meet an 18-year-old Peter Parker.
Yeah. So I'm just like watching this and I'm like, something is not working with how you guys are doing this, because I don't know. It was like the similar issue that I had with Hulu's Runaways TV show, where it looked like somebody had read the back cover of the first trade paperback and said, I'm going to make this show based on this random summary I got off of Wikipedia. And like, they didn't read the thing. They didn't get the characterizations right. They didn't do this right. It just felt like they picked some characters that fit these certain things and then just made the movie and hoped no one would get pissed off that all the characterizations were done wrong.
Well, so then how do we explain it being number in the top 10 on Netflix? Now, part of me wants to say people love a circus, people love a train wreck, and people are going to watch it burn. But then it makes me believe like maybe the answer isn't that it's superhero fatigue, but that people have bad movie fatigue, and that we've had a slew of really terrible cinematic movies, like one after the other, that now a movie with an auteur director with a singular vision who's had these ideas running around in his head for a long time, and now he gets to bring them to cinema. I look at audience scores and critic scores for Furiosa. They seem to match. Everyone who sees it is talking, very highly of this movie, yet it did not attract the general moving public.
And I think that may have to do more, like you said, people are kind of burned out with movies. And you could argue that maybe it's the political fatigue of Hollywood, where people are just getting kind of fed up with every interview, everything coming out of Hollywood is politics. Now people are just like, fuck it, I'll just watch it on Netflix when I don't have to listen to their interviews. Maybe it's kind of a burnout of politics. Maybe it's a burnout of the fact that it's like $15 a ticket to see a movie. Maybe it's like,
see, that to me also was like, what else did people do this Memorial weekend? They took the $250 it would have cost to bring their family there, maybe $200, maybe $150, maybe only $100, and put it towards doing anything else, eating, doing anything else in the world.
Like, if you subscribe to Netflix and watch this movie along with every other random reality show that Netflix has been pumping out, you're spending $15 to $19 a month. That's one person seeing a movie in theaters.
Yeah.
One time. Like,
Taylor, they're going to kill I feel like, just like in God Emperor Dune, Leto takes all the sandworms and they become very sparse. The spice becomes very difficult to get. I feel like cinemas are going to be like that. And maybe instead of your town having 5, your town has 1.
I've said before that I don't see movie dying anytime soon, but I don't see it surviving what it currently is doing. I see what movie becoming is very much what theater has become, where you get maybe 1 or 2 big theaters and it's more of a niche and people will watch it elsewhere. And the only reason this is happening is because of the fact that it's so goddamn expensive to go to theaters now. When we were kids, I mean, to put our age a little bit, I remember when I think it was like 94, 95, when the Santa Claus came out with Tim Allen.
Sure.
And it released on Christmas Day. And I remember when we went down to the theater to go see it, the line was around the theater. And mind you, this was like this theater we've talked about before. It was like this parking lot, then this like ledge, and then the theater was down here on this other ledge. And
Taylor,
this theater was wrapped around with people.
Toy Story 1, Toy Story 2 headlines, the re-releases of all the Star Wars movies, Phantom Menace, all headlines that we were waiting to get into.
And even movie. Now, like lines, whether or not lines exist because of people prepaying tickets online or Fandango, whatever you use, and picking your seats, whatever you argue, the fact that back then minimum wage was like $5-6 an hour, right? But movie theater tickets were like $2-3 tops a person, right? So even with that correlation, if minimum wage is $8 and a movie theater ticket was $5, that would still correlate to minimum wage being 15 now. So a ticket should not be more than $10. Yet somehow it's still way higher than that.
Yeah.
And then buying a bag of popcorn, buying a single thing of candy, buying a drink, that's another $25 just for like 3 little things. People are economically, we're in a hard spot, and people are getting sick of spending $200-$300 for one outing. And when they do go, they got to be a sure thing. And otherwise, they're just going to watch it on Netflix.
So then, do we now need to rethink like all of these movies that are coming out? Do we need to be like, okay, only 2 of these movies are going to hit? Maybe Deadpool and Wolverine, because it has so much. Everyone is very excited to see these 2 iconic characters together. But like, I don't know what the second movie is. And when I'm watching trailers for Beetlejuice, and that motorcycle gang movie with the guy who talks like Elvis, and then
the guy who played Elvis who still thinks he's Elvis. Yeah,
Taylor, he talked like Elvis in that motorcycle movie. He's like, "What do we do? Hey, what are we doing here, boys?" Like, I was like, "That's Elvis. Why is Elvis in a motorcycle gang?"
Like, Mr. Butler, you didn't do that freaking voice when you were playing the crazy cousin in Dune, so you can let it go.
Yeah,
Like,
no, that's his new default voice. That's like his oh, okay, I get to be this character for a while again.
No, it's funny because in his interviews, he's like, "Well, I guess I was just playing this character for so long that I lost myself in him, and this is just who I am now." And I'm like, I'm watching this, and I'm like, wouldn't it be fucking crazy if like Jared Leto just became any one of the random characters he method acts? Because that's apparently the logic that this kid has. Because,
Listen, this is all Hollywood nonsense. In a couple of years, he's all that's gonna go away, and he'll go, "Oh, that was so funny when I did that," but like that's not gonna happen anytime soon.
like, wow,
but again,
that was ridiculous.
But in saying all that, like, I don't know, is this between you, me, and the other people in the room? Are movies in for a bad year?
I definitely think so, and I think it's because a lot of people.
You are a moviegoer, though. Did you see that Planet of the Apes movie in the theaters?
I haven't, and it wasn't because I didn't want to see it. Like, it was ironically, for people wondering, my dad and Michael were born a day apart. So every year, when I forget that it's Michael's birthday, it's because I remembered it was my dad's birthday. And when I remember it's Michael's birthday, I always forget it's my dad's birthday. So it always turns into this like, holy shit, I forgot one of them. Which is really sad because they're both right next to each other.
That doesn't bother me.
Anyways, this year I said, Dad, we're going to go to the movies. Let's go see one of two movies. I said we could see Planet of the Apes or we could see Mad Max because I can't afford to see both today. And he was like, whatever you want to do, let's do it. And I looked at the reviews and I looked at my wife and said, look, they both got decent reviews. They're both making decent money. But honestly, Mad Max Fury Road was one of my favorite movies of the last decade. I want to see Furiosa. And she's like, let's see it then. I told my dad, he's like, yeah, I haven't seen a Mad Max movie since the 80s. And I'm like, what do you mean? You didn't see Fury Road? What's wrong with you? And I'm like, let's go see this. And we had such a blast. Chris Hemsworth was just absolutely fantastic as this terrible human being. And it was a great movie and I loved it. And it actually added a shit ton of context to Mad Max Fury Road. And it was a great fun time. And I was just, the whole time I'm just like, yes, this is what I wanted to see in a movie.
I also have many of those. I agree with you. While I was in the theater, I enjoyed every minute of it. I understood where this was in the context of the story. I appreciated it. The Red Letter Media guys talked about how this felt like a Kill Bill 1, Kill Bill Volume 2 situation.
Yeah.
That Fury Road is Volume 1, where we get the fight with the Crazy 88s, and the whole movie is go, go, go. And then the second movie is more quiet, more character-driven. And in that regard, it is a wonderful companion piece. Now, it's not Fury Road. And I think Fury Road is a once-in-a-decade movie. I don't think we get another Fury Road for a very long time.
If we ever do, because, I mean, Mad Max Wasteland been in development hell just as long as Furiosa was. So whether or not we ever get that long-awaited sequel, who knows at this point?
I don't even know if that's the next movie he wants to do. You know what I mean? I feel like he wants to go backwards before he goes forward.
What I always thought was interesting was so much about this was that this movie and Fury Road, it definitely feels like, yes, it's part of the Mad Max universe. But I went back and rewatched some of the older Mad Max films, especially like the first one, and it really felt like Mad Max, the world had just fallen apart a few weeks ago, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and Mad Max, I just watched that one too from 1979.
Yeah.
It almost feels like George Miller watched A Clockwork Orange and was like, what would that look like in Australia? And you're right. It's like the world has only fallen for a week because they still have eggs and toast in the world, but the vocabulary is changing. Also, that movie's kind of boring. It's actually really boring. But when you see Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, this movie to me felt like the bridge between the 80s and the year 2000. That we saw these characters that could have been in Thunderdome, could have been in the 80s, and we see how they move their way into the modern Mad Max universe.
Yeah. It was, but it was just so weird because it feels like he had this idea, like you said, and then as time went on, he slowly moved away from the old idea and is embracing the new one. And it really felt like, especially with this movie and Fury Road, that this is the world, and it's been like this for maybe 100 years. Not 10, not 20, but at least one generation. And especially when you had that older guy with the tattoos all over him talking about the old world,
History
I was like,
man.
yeah, okay, I can get behind that guy being a kid when this shit went down. So maybe I can buy that this is 60 years later. But in the context of the original timeline, that Max himself was a cop before everything went down, and then I see Tom Hardy playing Max now, and I'm like, so was he like 12 when he was a cop? Like, like how old is he supposed to be?
Listen,
So
I will tell you that I think also the Mad Max universe needs Mad Max again.
yes,
I think that I think Furiosa to me is the Zero to Mega Man X, and I like Furiosa. I like this movie. I like the character. I would like them to bring Charlize Theron back if we're going to do anything else with this character. But I think it's time for us to get Mad Max again. And if he wants to retcon the 1979 movie, great, do it. How does this Mad Max fit into this universe?
and I think what they also need to do, and I think something that a lot of people are asking for in the modern setting, was them to revisit the main cities. Because what we have is the wasteland, the middle of the Australian continent, right?
And I like that payoff on the promise from Fury Road. Are we going to Gastown or Bullet Farm? And now we got to see those places.
Right?
That's a great payoff.
So I always wondered, like, what's the best way for them to show the passage of time would be for Max to, like, say, we don't go over there and have to, like, trek through Sydney or something. Just be like, this is where everything went wrong. Or just show, like, the wasteland that was Sydney. Or, like, this is where the bombs fell. And just see the craters where these cities used to be. Something to at least show us that there is some sort of, like, this is where the fallout started. This is where the wars happened. Because initially, George Miller's whole idea was that this was supposed to be the post-apocalyptic version of the Gulf War. Like, the Gulf War existed, shit went south, everyone nuked each other, and this is the irradiated wasteland. And it was all in that time frame. So I've always wanted to see where they go with it. I would love to see them, even if, like I said, like you said, even if they retcon the older movies, the Mad Max as an idea more than a canon works for me.
Well, I think also that if this is going to happen, it's got to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
You know, George Miller, as he gets older, I do feel that I as long as his creator wants to keep creating, we should let him. I don't know. Do you think Warner Brothers will take a risk on him again? 100%. Not after this.
No, I think they will. Because it's one of those things where, like, yes, it didn't pay off, but it will eventually, probably just by word of mouth, because literally everyone who's seen it has said, go see this fucking movie.
And you know what else, Taylor? When I was watching this movie, I kept thinking that I would also be okay if we went 100 more years into the future, where like there was so many scenes where, like, you didn't really need dialogue, right? They're talking in their weird fake language. I'm thinking of that motorcycle chase at the beginning of the movie. Mm-hmm. Let's go 100 more years and get like language is now unrecognizable from what you and I think it is, and see what the characters look like, or have Mad Max's his long lost offspring, the last of the heroes, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, 9 years between these two films, and you can actually watch them back to back, and they still feel like the same film.
But I think that's also part of the problem. And I understand that probably has to do with COVID and lots of other things, but, like, you can't wait a decade. I mean, I also feel like that hurt Avatar in some respects.
Oh, yeah. Mad Max Fury Road budgeted about 150 to 185 million and made about 380 million in the box office. So it made its money back and then some. Right now, Furiosa has a reported budget of 168 million and has made about 70 million. So it is still possible that they'll make their money back, But I could very much see it be kind of a Dune situation where Dune Part 1 suffered the fate of COVID, but it was so well received that they said, we'll take the chance and we'll keep going. And they're very much, I think it's very possible.
I mean, is there any chance that people are just bummed out by this universe? Like, I enjoyed it, but in going back and watching it, it is a very dark universe to inhabit. It's not a place of joy.
It really isn't. I mean, I was watching it, and like even like my dad and my brother and my wife were all sitting there like, wow, this world fucking sucks. Like there's nothing good about it. It would suck to live here. I did really appreciate the random Easter egg of Mad Max watching from a distance. Like,
yes,
I was like, yes, there he is, looking down and saying, fuck that place.
I also think we need to get him back in his iconic car.
They need to rebuild his car. The fact that they dismantled it 30 seconds into Fury Road still hurts my heart.
Yeah.
But I would love to see it. I'd love to see them bring it back and like Mad Max it a bit more. You know?
There was so many things that I liked about this movie, and I was fine that it was a long movie. I thought that it maybe dragged a little bit, but I was still fine with that. Like, we saw snippets of the 40-day war. They didn't even show us like a battle or something like that. So like, there's so much of this universe he has that he can explore.
Yeah, it was very much so. And I really appreciated the, what is the terminology for it? The unreliable narrator.
Sure. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know.
Especially at the end where they did that unreliable narrator sequence of events. And I'm just like, this is fun. You could literally justify retconning the old movies using the unreliable narrator and say, this is how we did it.
And, as I'm looking online, originally this was supposed to have a narrator throughout. Let's get a history man tell the story of the fall of Max and have it be crazy. Have it, you know what I mean? It is unreliable. They don't really know what happened. Some of this sounds like magic.
Yeah. And I've always thought that would be a really funny way of doing it. Like, to me, that's what I wanted with World War Z. Like in the book, World War Z was very much a history, like it was like a History Channel special. Like, let's talk about the fall of man with the zombie wars. And it was like a history explanation of how this all happened. And then the movie came out and it was like, we're just going to show you how shit went wrong for the first few days. And I'm like, no, I wanted the aftermath. I wanted that History Channel special on how the war between the zombies happened. So I would,
and it also makes you feel safe, right? Because if it's a history book, it's like, oh, this happened, but like, hey, we survived it because we'll tell you what happened.
Yeah. There were so many moments in this film. I just loved it. I can't gush enough about it. People need to go fucking watch it. Just go see the movie on the biggest screen you can, and then immediately go home and watch Mad Max Fury Road, because this movie very much does a Rogue One and New Hope thing where it ends right as you're ready to start the next movie. So
yeah, and the final credits were a little. I didn't understand why we didn't just sit in what we were. Why do you have to remind me of the movie we didn't see?
Yeah, I was like, I especially when they did that, when they led up to that moment, and then they're like, let's show you the cliff notes of Fury Road. I'm like, no, just cut to black and say, now go home and watch Fury Road. Like, that's what they should have done. Just like immediately, like, by the way, go watch that movie.
I mean, I wonder. I mean, is the answer to bring back Mel Gibson? Is that really what the audience wants? Is that what people want? We want to see Mel Gibson one more time.
I don't know. Maybe.
Or the movie starts with Mel Gibson being like, "All right, let me tell you about the craziest thing I ever did," and then we go to Tom Hardy.
Maybe. I mean, I've always said that it would always be fun if they did a Star Wars TV show with old Lando telling the stories of young Lando and just cutting between the two actors. That would be a lot of fun. Like, do it full on young Indiana Jones style and just have older character narrate younger character. Like, I want that. Let's have an old Mel Gibson talk about, when I was doing this, this was how I did this. And then it just cuts to Tom Hardy stabbing some guy in the throat.
I mean, they expanded on so many things in this movie that I really like that. And I feel like there's some nitpicking you can do. Can we talk about how come CGI in movies feels like it took a step back all of a sudden? Why does everything feel like the CGI is not as good as it was 5 years ago?
Maybe it was just laziness, maybe it was the strikes, or maybe it was any of these things. But I thought that the decision that he made with the CGI in this film was actually intentionally stylistic.
I
You
also
could
thought
tell.
that as well. Yeah,
You
I
could
thought
tell
that
that
as
some of it,
well.
when it was there, you could tell it was there, but also at the same time, I really liked some of the more obvious moments. It was like when you have the desert looks very muted, and then all of the motorcycles are like a bright blue. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, I like what you're doing here because it looks like a painting and someone telling you the story. Like, as you look as far as the eye can see, everything is rust colored except for like it felt like it was me visually seeing what someone would describe in a story. So I
Yeah.
was like, I get this. I get what you're doing. It looks a little weird, but I get what you're doing. Um, so I don't know. I mean, maybe the CGI is just I don't know. I always go back to like in 1993, Steven Spielberg made Jurassic Park, and that movie still
Right.
looks better than most movies today.
Looks amazing. Totally watchable. It doesn't you there's yeah, it doesn't draw you out of it at all. You're totally convinced that
And
those
he did it.
dinosaurs are
He
there.
did it with puppets, robots, and some CGI.
Yeah.
And the trick was do everything as practical as you can, and then use the CGI to clean up and make it blend together. Like, why don't we do more of that?
Mm.
Is it just laziness? Is it just cost cutting? Like, do you just not want to make the puppet dinosaurs anymore?
I mean, maybe it is cost cutting, and maybe we need to like figure out a way to like move this money around a little bit more
I
to
don't
get
know.
better performances and like more people.
I feel like Hollywood has learned the wrong lessons from their mistakes, and they need to go back and relearn what was successful 30 years ago. Because
Oh
that
yeah, I
was
don't. There's no movies for a general audience anymore. It's either a very specific niche or remember berries.
yeah. But on a slightly different note, as before we wrap up, because I don't want to go and talk your ears off about Madam Web or Furiosa, because we could talk about that for hours. George Lucas over at Cannes over this past weekend,
He opened his mouth. What did he say?
he opened his mouth and it kind of sounded like he had seller's remorse in a sense, where he basically said that Disney doesn't know what they're doing. Um, the exact quote that has been blowing up all over the internet was that
Oh, it makes me so sad. It makes me so sad that he lived long enough to watch his baby die. That's
right.
awful.
He said, I was the only one who really knew what Star Wars was, who actually knew this world, because there's a lot to it. The Force, for example, nobody understood the Force. When they started the other ones after I sold the company, a lot of the ideas that were in the originals sort of got lost. But that's the way it is. You give it up, you give it up. And he definitely was kind of like, I mean, there's a lot of other quotes where he also kind of bitched about how like people were like, there needs to be more races, more this. And he's like, half my characters are fucking aliens. What else do you want? Like, there was so much of that kind of stuff where people, he's just like, look, there's so much pandering, so much nonsense, so much. He's like, nobody understood what the core of Star Wars actually was. And it
Did
wasn't what they're
he?
turning it into.
Yeah. Okay. So then what did, yeah, I also think that it's not about this. Is the core of all of this family then? Like that's the core story of the Luke. It's about, in a world of craziness, this interconnectivity of a family.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of it had to do with the turmoils and solidarity of a family. It had to do with like the Force itself was kind of like a man's communion with nature, and not so much this divine power as much as it is nature trying to combat the overarching reach of man. Like
Just
you have
George Lucas thinks lots of people can use the Force, right? Not just
he
special
thinks
people.
no, he George Lucas thinks that everyone is Force capable.
Okay.
The whole running motif of every random ass character in Star Wars franchise saying I have a bad feeling about this was always meant to be this notion that that's
Yeah.
the Force slipping in with every character. And the idea was that everyone is connected, everyone is part of this big symbiotic relationship with nature, and that you have the Sith, which is the massive industrial complex and the perversion of the Force, the perversion of nature, and then you have the Jedi, who were the selfless, more natural aspect of defending the world. So it was always meant to kind of be this nature versus industrial slash like
which
family
is what,
story.
yeah, and it speaks to why George Lucas is one of the great filmmakers. Everything you're saying is describing a Miyazaki movie
Yeah.
of nature versus industrialism, a family through it. I mean, you just described
I-
5 of his movies.
I actually, a coworker of mine was talking the other day, and she said, "Oh, I love Howl's Moving Castle. I love this." And I'm like, "Did you ever see Princess Mononoke?" And she's like, "No." I'm like, "That's my favorite one."
I just showed it to my brother-in-law. He was like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, I've seen these ones." I'm like, "No, the best one,
It's
the,
gonna
like,
hurt your heart. Sit down and watch it.
the summary of all of these theses, of all of these different stories, like, oh, Mononoke is the story."
Yeah, and honestly, I tried to explain this, and then she saw it. She watched it. She's like, "Holy crap, that was a lot more heavy-handed than I was expecting." I'm like, "Yeah, it's not Ponyo. Like, it's not the Little
No,
Mermaid."
it's not Ponyo.
Um,
Also, when is The Boy and the Huron coming out? Like months ago, it said that HBO Max got the rights to it and we're gonna show it.
yeah,
But I don't. They haven't said
it has to release on physical media first, and I think, I mean, I have it pre-ordered. I ordered the awesome Steelbook version. It What is the date? Let me just jump over to the date. July 9th.
Okay, so late summer,
Yes,
maybe
midsummer.
August.
No, I mean August, maybe August, September is when we'll see it on HBO. But
Okay.
I'm gonna buy it anyways. Why not? It's Miyazaki. You got to give him your money. He deserves it. If anyone does deserve it, it's Miyazaki.
Well, he's in that process of his life where he's now going to tell us that he's retired and then show up in 6 months with a third of a
Another
movie done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's gonna be like, I couldn't stop. I had another story to
He
tell.
just
And then
draws
you're
every
like,
day.
Yeah. But no, George Lucas talking about it's kind of him. It was kind of very much him lamenting about how, like, yes, Star Wars got new life. Star Wars expanded. Star Wars has become this thing, but at what cost? And that cost being the soul of his child.
Yeah, the Sith took over. I mean, he like gave it up to the
He
industrialists.
sold it to the evil empire.
Yeah, isn't that worse? Do you have that clip where he's like, "I sold Star Wars to the white slavers"? It's like, oh yeah, like you get it. You use the language from your own movie.
Yeah.
Such a good. It's like, oh boy. I'm sad to hear that. I also think that he's a little to blame in that, supposedly the people he left in charge of Lucasfilm knew what they were doing. Unfortunately, they've been called out publicly by cartoon shows of no less. I mean, they really dropped the ball.
It's such an interesting notion that he gave the hands to Kathleen Kennedy. And it kind of goes to show you that there's so many people that you can trust explicitly, but you also have to think, do they share those same ideals as me? Do they share that same, like, would they be the person that could carry this on for me? Like, I think about the Tolkien estate, right? Like, and I think about how the grandkids of the Tolkien estate are 100% on board with what Amazon is bastardizing of the franchise, and we're mad about what WB had done with it. And I'm like, but the WB choice to make the franchise what it is what gave so many people motivation to read the books. And then you have what Amazon did, and so many people are just pissed off at them not following the books. Like, you could be mad at Warner Brothers all you want for making an action film out of this franchise, but you have to also look, like, whoever you leave these things to, do they have the same ideals as you? Do they still actually care about the same things that you do? Like, if I were to leave something to someone, if I were to leave TCN to somebody, I would want them to be like, oh, I trust this person explicitly. But I also have to have the foresight and the knowledge that if I turned over the podcast to you, Michael, would you run the show the same way? No,
I would say,
because,
Taylor, I have a lot of ideas, and guess what, Taylor? We're going to Alien Town.
Yeah,
my next guest is gonna be
exactly. And so that's the thing, is like, he probably worked with Kathleen for years and said, I know this girl, she's going to do a great job. But then when Kathleen got her power, she probably decided, maybe I won't do it the way George did it. And then she went completely in a different direction than he was expecting.
I think just because she was part of it, like, you're right. She did everything he said, she executed on and made happen. And when you lost that oversight, yeah, I think she had a different vision of it. And I don't think that her vision necessarily was bad, but again, it was not
Wasn't his
well
vision.
executed, and it was not, and these ideas were not communicated clearly.
And it wasn't his vision. I think that's always what kind of matters. It's like you don't know who you can actually trust with these things because you don't know who actually deep down has the same ideals as you or the same core beliefs. Like I could have seen him pass it over to Steven Spielberg and Steven would still do something very different with it, but still also be closer to what George wanted because of how close their friendship was and how much they worked with each other in the past. I could have seen that more likely than what Kathleen did with it.
I also feel like Dave Filoni really understands the older part of George Lucas. Like he really gets that prequel trilogy and what they were trying to say. Those movies speak to him differently than they speak to me. I wish that there was somebody that understood those original three. And I guess I thought it was going to be Favreau, but I think he soured to the whole thing because they kept handcuffing his ideas.
I definitely think that the best thing that she ever did in the hands of with the hands and the reins of Lucasfilm was to give creative control to Dave Filoni, because Dave Filoni was very much the person that I think George probably would have rather given Star Wars to if he was ready at the time. Because Dave was essentially like the perfect apprentice, the perfect fanboy, the perfect spiritual successor to George that you could have gotten. But at the time when he was ready to hand off Star Wars, there was no way that this guy who'd worked on a few cartoons was even remotely capable of doing what needed to be done.
Right.
But the one 30, 40-year veteran who was running every production job, did everything Kathleen made more sense on paper.
Is there any way that when Bob Iger brought in George Lucas owns a ton of Disney stock. He's one of the biggest shareholders in Disney. I guarantee you that meeting was, please don't freak out. Is there any way George Lucas said, you should let me do another movie?
George left Star Wars because he wanted to spend more time with his kids and didn't want to lose the chance to grow up with them. Now his kids are all adults. I could easily see George coming back and say, look, let me work with Dave and let me fix what needs to be fixed. And maybe if that just means that George is going to come in as a very handsy executive producer who wants to like make sure they don't bastardize his baby anymore.
Taylor, handsy executive producer that doesn't bastardize your baby is basically the definition of what Yoda did. He was very handsy. He really got in there. He like got Luke to a spot. Yeah, I think he needs to go be on set and like just be there again to like get everybody back on board. That Star Wars is supposed to be fun, about good guys.
I think it's also very telling that out of all the productions for Star Wars, right, for all the movies, all the shows, all the stuff they were doing, the only sets that he actually visited while he was like during all of this was Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau's. Like he actually showed up to visit their sets when they were filming Mandalorian, and he got to see Grogu. He got to do all this stuff. Like I think that alone kind of tells you that which group does he have this unspoken bias toward?
Right.
And it clearly wasn't Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams' group when they were making the sequel trilogy. It was the people that were making the spiritual successor to his projects.
Maybe we need to do a roundtable to talk about how fabulous X-Men 97 was and bring some other people on here to talk about it. And I only say that because like talking about Madam Web as a superhero like piece and its bad storytelling, man, X-Men 97 executed on lots of great ideas and lots of through lines and really showed that you can tell these stories in interesting, fun ways if you really utilize the medium that you're in. And I feel like it has raised the bar. I think we have to talk about that bar another day, though.
Yeah, I definitely do, because I think that what they did with X-Men 97 is Marvel somehow raised their own bar. I don't think they were even expecting it to be as big of a hit as it was. And now it's like, I think it's the highest rated MCU project of all the
Mm.
MCU. I think they realized that, oh shit, we did something good here. What do we do now?
Well, let's get the boy back on. Let's get Sunspot. Let's get him back on so we can ask him about what he thinks about his character arc.
I have a few other people I want to bring on too. Maybe we'll do that before my baby's born. So we'll see how this goes.
Okie
But-
dokie.
On that note, everyone, thank you so much for joining us this week. If you want to help keep the lights on, you want to help keep supporting us, head over to the patreon.com/theculturednerd. If you're sitting in front of your screen, if you're watching this on your phone or whatever, go ahead, scan that QR code, head up all the links on there. There's other ways to donate other than the Patreon to help us keep afloat. And for those of you who want to check us out on other places, there's all of the links to all of our socials. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe. It does wonders for this channel. It helps us keep moving. As long as we're moving progress, the algorithm's not going to burn us at the stake. So, like I said, like, comment, subscribe, scan that QR code, harass me on the social medias. Tell us what you thought. At the end of this, in the comment section below, the question for this week is, what do you want to see with the future of Mad Max? Because that is something that I have so many thoughts on, and I would love to hear yours. Did you see Furiosa? Do you want to see another Wasteland spinoff before another Max movie, or do you think they need to go back to Mad Max? Sound off in the comments below. Tell us what you think. And until the next time, thank you, everyone.
Adios, muchachos.